My name is Arthur Vance, but my friends just call me Artie. I'm 74 years old now, living right here in Maple Valley, Ohio. For most of my life, I was a delivery driver. I drove one of those big brown trucks, hauling everything from farm supplies to emergency medicine, whatever folks needed. Today, I'm living quietly on my pension. Well, quietly is maybe just a figure of speech. After everything that happened, it took a long, long time for my heart to find its old rhythm, for the noise in my head to finally quiet down. My goodness, you think you know someone like the back of your hand, and then one day you realize you've never even seen that hand clearly. That's exactly what happened to me, after 40 years of what I thought was a shared life. I never thought I'd tell this story to anyone, but maybe it's a warning for whoever's listening. You build your life on a solid foundation. You trust people. You let them take the wheel. And then sometimes, an invisible crack in the road, just a tiny moment, can shatter the whole axle. For me, that moment was a family visit I canceled at the last minute. If I had gotten in my truck and made that trip like I planned, I'd probably still be living in that sweet, ignorant fog today. But fate, or God, who knows, wanted me to see the truth. This was back in March of 2020. I was 69 at the time. My wife, Eleanor, and we'd been married for 40 years, spent a lifetime together, raised 2 kids, built our home on land my father left me. That month, I was supposed to drive out to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to visit my brother Samuel, who was sick. Eleanor wasn't coming along. She said she had urgent business with the library's donation committee. That sounded normal. It was part of the busy little world she'd built for herself. Nothing unusual about it at all. She'd even mentioned that while I was gone, she'd give the house a good spring cleaning and donate some of my old delivery uniforms. I'd traveled alone before. She'd stayed home. I didn't suspect a thing. The trip was set for Wednesday. I planned on staying for a week. On Tuesday night, I packed my small travel bag, set out my medications. Eleanor had even baked a box of homemade ginger cookies for me to take to Samuel. He always did love her spicy cookies. Just before dawn, the phone rang. It was my nephew. He told me Samuel had been taken to the hospital and, with the new restrictions, it was best to postpone my visit. I wouldn't even be able to see him. Of course, I was worried. After I hung up, my hand just hung in the air for a moment. But I also realized, if I was going to drive all that way and not even see my brother through a window, there was no point in going. And that's when the idea hit me. Instead of telling Eleanor the trip was off, I'd surprise her. You see, lately, our marriage had gotten a bit distant. We'd fallen into that long married routine. We were like 2 good friends sharing a house, barely pausing from the newspaper to say, "Good morning." So I thought, I'll just pretend I left for the trip. She'll think I'm gone. Then I'll come back at the end of the day with flowers, some takeout from her favorite Italian place. We'll have a special dinner. A strange idea for a 69-year-old man, maybe. But at the time, it felt like a great plan. What I didn't know was that this one decision would change everything in my life. Absolutely everything. And not for the better. It was the side of life you never expect. The side you can't even imagine exists. Sometimes you spend your whole life with a person and think you know everything about them. But folks, there are some things only God knows. So would you have done what I did at 69? Let me know in the comments. I'm truly curious. I was born right here in Maple Valley, back in 1951 when everything was very different. My father, Thomas Vance, had a small plot of land where he grew corn and soybeans, like most everyone else. We were 5 kids: me, Samuel, Daniel, Clara, and Rose. I was the second oldest. Our home was simple: a wooden place with a potbelly stove that burned all day to keep out that sharp Ohio cold. My goodness, it was cold. In the mornings, frost covered everything. We'd go out with numb feet to help with the barn chores. Life wasn't easy. We knew every day was a struggle, but there was a warmth in that struggle. My mother, Maria, made the best beef stew I've ever had, with that thick cornbread. And those traditional Sunday roasts you only find here in the Midwest. The biggest treat? If we had a little extra money, she'd make a fresh apple pie. What a delight that was. We'd eat it warm with a glass of fresh milk. I went to the little village school about 2 miles from our home, up until the 4th grade. My siblings and I walked there every day. When it rained, we wrapped ourselves in old burlap sacks my mother saved, but we'd still get soaked. I remember the itch of those sacks, the smell of wet wool. In the deep of winter, if a blizzard hit, there were days we just couldn't go. The teachers understood. It was the same for everyone. They knew we were needed on the farm. Around 1960, I was 9, I think, and I found my life's path. My father took me to Mr. Henry Gideon's delivery depot. Mr. Gideon was a man who'd served in the war, always wore a spotless shirt, solidly built, with kind eyes. We were there to pick up an urgent tractor part, and I was mesmerized. I watched that big delivery truck, the huge maps on the wall showing the routes, the stacks of packages labeled for distant cities: Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Chicago. I watched that organized chaos, that constant flow of energy. I saw Mr. Gideon holding a clipboard, marking things off. I looked at my father and said, "One day, I'm going to drive that truck, Dad. I'll go everywhere on that map." Mr. Thomas smiled. "If that's what you want, son, you'll have to work very hard." And I did. By the time I was 14, around 1965, I started working as Mr. Gideon's assistant after school and on weekends. At first, I just cleaned the warehouse, washed the truck, sorted packages. But Gideon, the old man, he slowly taught me the trade. He had no son of his own, just 2 daughters. And I think he saw me as someone to pass his knowledge on to. "Artie," he'd tell me in that deep, gravelly voice of his, "you have to understand, these aren't just boxes. They're people's hopes. Sometimes it's medicine. Sometimes it's a letter they've waited weeks for. You have to respect the route. You must never forget that people are trusting you. They're waiting at the door for that package." I remember during the Maple Valley County Fair, Mr. Gideon would always invite me to his house for dinner. The table would be loaded with barbecue ribs, corn salad, fresh beans, and every kind of homemade pie. His wife, Mrs. Martha, treated me like I was her own son. In 1968, when I was 17, a terrible flood hit the area. The Scioto River overflowed, and many people lost everything. Our house was on high ground, thankfully, but Mr. Gideon's warehouse was completely submerged. The trucks, God, it broke my heart to see that big brown truck buried up to its wheels in muddy water. For 2 weeks, I helped him salvage what we could. Hundreds of packages were ruined. Wet cardboard falling apart, ink-stained labels running. All the ledgers turned to mud. It was a sad time. But it was also when he told me, "Artie, you're not just an assistant anymore. You're my partner." It was one of the happiest days of my life. By the time I turned 18 in 1969, I'd learned just about everything Mr. Gideon could teach me. I was making delivery runs on my own, driving that big truck on the rural roads of Ohio. It was a kind of freedom. People started to know me by name. "I want Artie Vance to deliver it," they'd say. "He always arrives on time." This didn't make Mr. Gideon jealous. It made him proud. "That's how it should be," he'd say. Around that time, the area was developing. Farms needed special deliveries. Shops in town needed urgent orders. We specialized in that. A farmer might come in with just a phone number and say, "Artie, I need a part, urgently, from a supplier in Cleveland." And we'd have it at his barn door the next day. Of course, it wasn't all work. On weekends, we'd gather in the back room of the fire station to play dominoes, or sit in the town square cafe, or go to the church social dances. I wasn't much of a partier, always more reserved. But I loved being with my friends, sharing stories, laughing. Back then, entertainment was simple, but it was sincere. In 1970, when I was 19, I had my first great sorrow. Mr. Gideon had a stroke. Right there in the warehouse. I was with him. I saw him bend down for a package, stumble, and drop his delivery board. He clutched his chest. I ran to him. I called for help. But by the time the ambulance arrived, there was nothing to be done. I hadn't just lost a mentor. I'd lost a second father. After the funeral, Mrs. Martha called me. "Artie," she said, "Henry wanted you to have the warehouse. It was his dream to see you keep driving those trucks." She offered to sell me his share in installments, on my own time. Taking on that job alone at just 19, it was a huge responsibility. But I couldn't let Mr. Gideon's legacy, those roots, die. And just like that, I became the owner of the only delivery company in Maple Valley. Still just a young man with his whole life ahead, my father supported the decision. He'd already seen I wasn't cut out for farming like my brothers. Samuel and Daniel followed in his footsteps with the crops. My sisters, Clara and Rose, married local farmers' sons at a young age. I was the odd one out, the one who chose a different path. But Mr. Thomas used to tell me, "Every man should follow what his heart tells him, son. And your heart has always been as restless as the roads on that map." In 1972, I was 21 and I met Eleanor. She had come from Pittsburgh to teach at our town school. Maple Valley was growing, families were settling in, and we needed more teachers. Eleanor came to teach elementary school. She was a beautiful young woman. Long dark hair, green eyes, and a confident, clear way of speaking that caught my attention the first day I saw her. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was in the warehouse, and she came in asking about a shipment. The school had ordered new reading books, a big box, and it was late. "Do you manage the deliveries?" she asked, looking a little surprised at how young I was. "Yes, ma'am, I do, Artie," I replied. "No need to call me sir, though. I'm not that old," I joked. And she let out this clear, crystal-like laugh that just warmed my heart. I checked the logbooks, made a few calls, and promised her the box would be in her hands the next day. And it was. I delivered it myself. When she came by to sign for it, I asked her if she'd like a coffee at Rosie's Diner, just around the corner. It was the meeting place for everyone in Maple Valley. Cherry pie, warm biscuits, and the best coffee in Ohio. She accepted, and that was the first of many conversations. Eleanor was different from the local girls. She'd studied in the big city, in Pittsburgh. She was educated. She talked about books and theater and things I barely knew about with my simple high school education. But she never made me feel inferior. On the contrary, she seemed genuinely interested in my work, the roots, asking how many miles I drove, wanting to know the story of Mr. Gideon. "What's the strangest thing you've ever delivered?" she'd ask. We started dating that April. It was complicated at first. Her family in Pittsburgh, university graduates, educated women, they didn't like the idea of their daughter dating a truck driver from a small town. But Eleanor was always determined. "They'll have to accept it," she'd say, "because I chose you." And over time, as they got to know me, they did. They saw that despite my lack of formal education, I was hardworking, honest, and running my own business. Our courtship lasted 2 years. Wonderful times, full of discovery. We'd walk hand in hand around town, go to the dances at the firehouse. We went to the county fair, the rodeo events, and the school's Christmas pageant. I always helped set up the stage. Everyone knew we were a couple. In 1974, at 23, I proposed. I bought the best, simplest ring I could afford and took her to that beautiful little spot near town, the park on the banks of the Scioto River. It was autumn. The leaves were turning yellow. The air was cool, but the sun was warm. There, by the riverbank, I got down on one knee and asked her to be my wife. She cried, she hugged me, and she said yes. It was one of the happiest moments of my life. We were married in January 1975. I was 24, she was 22. It was a simple ceremony at the First Presbyterian Church. Afterward, we had the reception in the fire station hall. Where else? Roast beef, potato salad. A local jazz band played and we danced all night. Our honeymoon was 3 days at Niagara Falls. 3 days was all I could spare. The roots, the packages, they couldn't wait. We moved into a small rental house near the warehouse. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Eleanor kept teaching, and I worked more and more. Maple Valley was growing. People were ordering more from catalogs. Stores were bringing in more goods from Columbus and Cleveland. The work never stopped. Thank God. In 1977, when I was 26, we managed to buy our first piece of land. It was a bit out of the way back then, but it was a good-sized plot. We built it slowly. First, a barn that served as a garage and storage, then the house itself. I carried every plank of wood for that house with my own hands, after a full day of driving. Eleanor helped too, painting, organizing, turning that place into our home. It was a time of hard work, but also togetherness. We shared a common dream: build a stable life, raise our children, and be happy with what God gave us. At night, we'd sit on the porch, drink coffee, look at the stars, and plan. She'd talk about her students, and I'd tell her what happened on my route. And so, we lived, day by day. In 1978, at 27, I got an offer to expand. A big national catalog company in Columbus wanted a special deal for all home deliveries in our area. This was a big step. My one truck wouldn't be enough. It meant hiring full-time drivers, buying at least 2 more trucks. I talked it over with Eleanor. She was always the educated one, helping me with the numbers, the risks. "If this is what you want, Artie, I support you," she said. And so, I went from a small-town delivery guy to a small-scale logistics manager. I hired 2 young guys from the community who, like me, loved to drive. I expanded the warehouse. The work doubled. The fatigue doubled, but the satisfaction, that was worth it. Eleanor would sometimes joke, "I'm jealous of those trucks, Artie. You spend more time with them than with me." In 1979, I was 28, and we had our first great joy. Eleanor was pregnant. We'd been trying. When the doctor confirmed it, it was a celebration. She taught until her 6th month, then took leave. We prepared everything so carefully. I made the crib myself, from sturdy oak off my father's land. Eleanor knitted clothes, sewed blankets. Our first child, Leo, was born in May 1980. I was 29. A strong, healthy boy, rosy-cheeked. I remember his first cry, the feeling of holding that tiny being in my calloused hands hardened from the steering wheel. "Take good care of him," Eleanor said, tired but happy in her hospital bed. We'd had to go to Pittsburgh. No suitable maternity ward in Maple Valley back then. Leo's arrival changed our lives. Eleanor took time off work, and I worked double shifts to make up for it. I took the longest, most exhausting routes myself, but I never complained. Every smile from my son was worth it. I'd come home, my back aching from the packages, but I always had energy to play with him, give him a bath, tell him truck stories. Eleanor said I was a forgiving father. She was right. 3 years later, in 1983, our second joy arrived. Eleanor was pregnant again. This time we were calmer. We had experience. Leo, at 3, didn't quite understand, but we prepared him. "You're going to be a big brother," I'd joke. "You'll have to show him the good spot in the truck." In January 1984, our daughter Nina was born. If Leo was my copy, Nina was her mother's portrait. The same green eyes, the same determined smile. A little princess who completed our family. The house that once seemed spacious now felt small, filled with toys and laughter. It was messy, but it was a happy mess. The 1980s were stable years for us. Business was good. Vance Delivery Services, though most folks just called it Artie's Express, had a great reputation. We were transporting urgent medical supplies from Cleveland now, sensitive cargo. People said, "If Artie handles it, it'll arrive on time." Eleanor went back to teaching when Nina turned 2. We found a reliable woman, Mrs. Agnes, to look after the kids. It was a simple life, but it was full. At least, that's what I believed. The 1990s arrived, bringing a lot of changes to the country. But life in Maple Valley kept its calm, steady pace. In 1990, I was 39. The depot was well established. I had 5 drivers, 2 warehouse workers, all trained by me. Leo, now 10, loved hanging around the depot after school, helping me clean trucks, looking at the big maps. Nina, at 6, was more attached to Eleanor, always with her books, already showing an intelligence that impressed her teachers. In 1992, Eleanor became the elementary school principal. I was 41. It was a recognition of her dedication. I was proud of her, of our life, of what we had built. Our home was complete, with a beautiful garden Eleanor tended and vines out back. Traditions were strong. On Sundays, the house would fill with my siblings and their kids. The women prepared potato salad and baked beans, and I'd cook meat on the stone barbecue I'd built. The kids played in the garden. We adults drank coffee, talked about life. In 1995, when I was 44, another flood hit. Worse than the one in '68. The Scioto rose so high it flooded parts of town that had never been touched. Our house was safe, but the warehouse was flooded again. We lost 2 trucks, their engines ruined, hundreds of packages, and worst of all, this being the 90s, our new computer system, with all our records and routes, was buried in mud. It was a tough blow, but the community came together. My drivers, neighbors, everyone helped clean up. That's when I saw the value of the relationships I'd built. Eleanor was a force. She organized fundraisers at the school, secured donations, all while managing her principal duties. The kids did their part. Leo, 15, worked alongside me like a grown man, hauling wet, ruined boxes. Nina, 11, helped her mom with donation lists. That tragedy, as hard as it was, brought our family closer. By 1996, we'd not only recovered, we'd improved. I rebuilt the warehouse on higher ground. We expanded, got more modern tracking systems. The business grew so much I had to hire 2 more drivers. I wasn't driving as much myself. I'd become more of a manager. But I still took the wheel from time to time, especially for the heavy loads or when a driver was sick. I loved that feeling. The open road. Time passed. The kids grew up. Leo graduated high school in 1998 when I was 47. He wanted to stay in the business. "Dad, I want to study logistics management," he said. I was so proud. My dad had barely been able to afford my education. And here I was, sending my son to college in Columbus. We entered the year 2000. I was 49 and life seemed perfect. Eleanor and I celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary. We threw a party, renewed our vows. She looked stunning in an emerald green dress that brought out her eyes. Our children, our friends, everyone was there. I remember looking around and thinking, we did it. Everything we dreamed of, it's right here. I truly believed that feeling would last forever. In 2002, Leo graduated and came back to Maple Valley. He had offers from big companies in Columbus, but he chose to work with me. "I want to modernize the warehouse, Dad," he said, full of enthusiasm. And we did. His business knowledge and my practical experience, we were no longer Artie's Express. We became Vance Logistics and Distribution. Mr. Gideon wouldn't have believed it. Nina chose a different path. In 2003, she started studying literature at Ohio State. She commuted by bus every day, didn't want to leave home. "I prefer the tranquility of Maple Valley," she'd say. Eleanor helped her with her essays. They discussed books. It was lovely to see them together, so similar in how they thought. They had their own little intellectual world. Our routine was quiet. I'd go to the warehouse, Eleanor to the school. We'd meet for dinner. Always together, talking about our day. In 2006, Nina graduated and started working as an English teacher at the same school where her mother was principal. Another reason to be proud. That same year, Leo, now 26, met Sarah, a girl who'd moved from Dayton to work at the bank. They started dating, and it was serious. She fit right in. They married in 2008. Just like ours, a beautiful party in the fire station hall. In 2010, at 59, I became a grandfather. Sarah gave birth to Maya. The next year, Noah arrived. They were the joy of our home. Eleanor melted around them. "You're spoiling these kids, woman," I'd tease her. But I was just as bad. I built Maya a wooden playhouse and Noah a rocking horse. My old craft skills hadn't rusted. Nina found her husband, too. In 2012, she started dating David, a math teacher, a serious, hard-working young man. They married in 2014. Eleanor retired in 2015. I was 64. After 40 years in education, they threw her a surprise party at the school. Former students, some with kids of their own who were now her students. It was moving. I was so proud of my wife. My strong, respected, educated partner. As for me, I'd handed most of the management to Leo, but I still went in every day. "I can't sit still," I'd say. But truth was, I couldn't get behind the wheel like I used to. In 2016, at 65, my right shoulder gave out. This is the price for lifting heavy packages for 40 years, Artie, the doctor said. We'll operate, but don't expect your old strength back. He was right. After the surgery, I couldn't lift a heavy box into a truck bed. It felt like losing a part of myself, steering that wheel, doing the heavy work. It was who I was. Now I just wandered the depot, looked at Leo's optimized routes, and chatted with old customers. Our days were calmer. After Eleanor retired, she devoted herself to her garden, her reading, and the grandkids. I had more time for fishing, for playing dominoes with my friends at the firehouse. We had entered what we thought were our golden years. The years passed quietly, until 2018. I turned 67. That year, I started to notice vague changes in Eleanor. Small things, nothing to make me suspect anything serious, but strange. She'd always been busy, school principal, library committee, but now, in her third year of retirement, her activities hadn't just increased, they'd changed. At first, it was normal. Art history seminars in Columbus on Tuesdays, library volunteering on Thursdays, a Shakespeare reading club on Saturdays. It all seemed legitimate. I thought it was good for her. It's nice to have things to keep your mind occupied, Ellie, I'd say. She'd smile, kiss my forehead. It is, Artie. Can't just sit around. But slowly, things started not adding up. Once, she said she was going to a library committee meeting. The next day, I mentioned it to our neighbor, Mrs. Margaret, who was in the same group. I wanted to donate a check. Mrs. Margaret looked confused. But there was no meeting yesterday, Artie. It was canceled. When I asked Eleanor, she brushed it off. Oh, I must have mixed up the date. My memory isn't what it used to be, she said with a laugh. Another time, she came home wearing an expensive-looking silk blouse, not her usual style. When I complimented her, she seemed nervous. Oh, just saw it in Columbus. It was on sale, she said quickly, and put it in the back of the closet. She was paying more attention to her appearance. More trips to the hairdresser. Dyeing her hair more often. New creams, new perfumes. Well, I have time to take care of myself now, she'd say. Towards the end of 2018, Eleanor started keeping her cell phone glued to her. She used to barely use the thing. Now it was always with her, in her apron pocket in the garden. She'd even take it into the bathroom when she showered, placing it on the counter. One night, I woke up with that old ache in my shoulder, and she wasn't in bed. I found her in the dark kitchen, texting furiously, her face lit by the blue light. When I asked what she was doing, she jumped, nearly dropped the phone. Oh, Artie, you scared me. It's Nina. She's having trouble sleeping, so we're texting. The next day, I casually asked Nina if she was sleeping okay. She looked confused. No, Daddy. I sleep like a log. Why? I didn't mention her mother's late-night texts. I didn't want to cause trouble or look like some paranoid old man. It was probably a misunderstanding. But the small inconsistencies, they kept piling up, like the ache in my shoulder. A pain you could ignore, but it never fully went away. In January 2019, Eleanor announced she was taking her art history seminar to the next level. She'd enrolled in a special certificate program at the Columbus Museum of Art. Introduction to Art Curation, or some fancy name. Twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Seemed reasonable. Exactly the kind of thing my educated wife would do. A few weeks later, I got a call from Big Walter, an old driver friend who used to do the Columbus route with me. We were catching up. I mentioned I was waiting on Eleanor, who was at her class at the art museum. Walter laughed. "What course is that, Artie?" he said. "My wife, Clara, volunteers as a guide at that museum. She organizes all the senior programs. She's never mentioned a curator certificate." That stuck in my mind. A little piece of ice dropped into my heart. When Eleanor came home that Tuesday, I asked for details. Where it was, who was there, what she learned. She looked me right in the eye and answered without hesitation. "We had a great presentation on Impressionism today, Artie. The use of light. Mesmerizing." But something in her eyes didn't convince me. That night, while she was asleep, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through her bag, looking for any material from the class. I found nothing. No notebook, no notes, no museum ticket. Nothing. The next Thursday, I used the ache in my shoulder as an excuse. Told her I couldn't take her to the bus stop. "Oh, what a shame," she said, looking almost relieved. "No problem. I can catch the bus from the corner." After she left, with a knot in my stomach, I made a decision. I was going to follow her. I couldn't drive that long with my shoulder, so I went to the garage and found Leo. I was embarrassed. I told him a half-truth. "Son, I want to surprise your mom. I'm planning to follow her to Columbus, take her to her favorite restaurant. Can you drive me?" Leo, good-natured as ever, agreed to his 69-year-old father's strange romantic plan. We took one of the company's plain vans, no logo. We kept our distance. We watched her board the bus to Columbus. We followed that bus all the way to the station. My stomach was so tight I could barely breathe. In Columbus, Eleanor didn't head toward any museum. She boarded another bus, one heading to the chic, luxurious area north of downtown, the short north. She got off in front of a small French cafe. From the van, we watched her go inside. Leo was quiet, probably wondering why his dad's surprise involved so much secrecy. Eleanor sat at a table. A few minutes later, a man approached. He was a well-dressed gentleman. Neat gray hair, expensive-looking coat. Around 65, 70 maybe. He greeted Eleanor by taking her hand and kissing her cheek. It wasn't overly affectionate, but it lasted just a bit too long for a friendly kiss. They sat there for almost 2 hours. They drank coffee. They laughed. They held hands across the table. And I sat in that van with Leo, feeling the ache in my shoulder spread to my heart. "Do you want me to go in there, Dad?" Leo finally asked, noticing my state. "For the surprise?" "No," I said, my voice hoarse. "Let's go, I've seen enough." We drove back to Maple Valley in silence. I was trying to process what I'd seen. It was romantic. But maybe it was innocent. Then why lie about the art curatorship? When she got home, I acted normal. I asked about her class. She gave me the usual story, with details about Monet paintings she supposedly saw. The lie was so natural, so smooth. It confused me even more. Was I overreacting? Over the next few weeks, I watched her. On course days, she came back with a different sparkle in her eye. Sometimes she'd bring me small gifts, as if to make up for something. "Saw this and thought of you," she'd say, handing me new pipe tobacco. In March 2019, she had another announcement. "I'm joining a retired educators travel group. They organize cultural trips. The first one is to Cincinnati next month." The trip lasted 3 days. We spoke on the phone. She mentioned museums, a symphony. She sent photos of tourist spots. Seemed normal. But when she returned, I noticed a new silk scarf. A delicate piece looked expensive. The ladies in the group bought me a gift, she explained. The next month, May, another trip. Chicago this time. An art exhibit. I asked for the organizer's contact information. I said the pain in my shoulder was keeping me up. I might need to reach her in an emergency. Eleanor was visibly annoyed. "You're being paranoid, Artie." But she gave me a name and number, Mrs. Peterson. I called. A friendly, professional woman confirmed the group and the trip. "Oh yes, Mr. Vance. Eleanor is a wonderful woman. We're so excited." That reassured me for a while. I learned later that Mrs. Peterson was one of her new friends from Columbus, who had agreed to cover for her if I called. She had built a whole support system. The group trips became regular. Chicago, Indianapolis, Pittsburgh even, pretending to visit her family. After each trip, she seemed more distant. Our once close relationship was cooling. We talked less. Our intimacy, well, it was almost completely gone. I blamed old age, my shoulder, her new hobbies. In September, I accidentally found a credit card statement. It was a separate account, in her name only, one I never knew existed. I found it in the junk mail. There were charges at a hotel in Cleveland. On a weekend she was supposed to be home, an expensive hotel. I confronted her. I tried to stay calm. "Ellie, what's this?" I asked, putting the statement on the kitchen table. She flushed, but recovered quickly. "Oh, that's for the library committee for fundraiser expenses. That hotel charge was a mistake. I accidentally used the wrong card. I already called to fix it." I accepted the explanation, not because I believed it, but because I didn't have the strength to blow up 45 years of marriage right there in the kitchen. That Christmas, it was strange. We were all together. Leo, Nina, the grandkids. But there was a tension in the air. Eleanor was there, but her mind was far away. She kept checking her phone, smiling at the screen. Our children exchanged worried glances. I entered 2020 with a heavy heart. In February, we celebrated our 45th anniversary. I made one last attempt. I bought flowers, reserved a table at her favorite Italian place in Columbus. For a few hours, it was like the old days. She took my hand. She looked into my eyes, and she said, "It's been a wonderful 45 years, Artie." I didn't notice it at the time, but later, standing in that hotel room, those words echoed in my head. She used the past tense, not "it has been," "it been," as if she was talking about a closed, finished chapter. And that brings us back to March 2020, my trip to Pittsburgh to see Samuel. He really was sick. I really did plan to go, and Eleanor, as usual, said she couldn't come. Library committee. I didn't question it. On the eve of the trip, I got that call from my nephew. Samuel was hospitalized. Postpone the visit. And that's when the idea came. To pretend I had gone anyway. To come back and surprise her. Part of me truly wanted to make a romantic gesture, to save what was fading. But another part of me, the part that had been accumulating doubts for months, gnawing at me like the ache in my shoulder, that part just wanted to know the truth. And so, I set out on my fake trip on that fateful day to find out what was happening in my 45-year marriage. I didn't know the truth would be so much more painful than all my doubts. On the morning of Wednesday, March 11th, 2020, I left home with my small travel bag. I gave Eleanor a quick kiss on the cheek. Take good care of Samuel. Give him a hug for me, she said, looking genuinely concerned. I'll be back next Tuesday, I replied, feeling the lump in my throat from the lie. I got in my truck, but instead of turning toward Pittsburgh, I drove straight to the warehouse. I had it arranged with Leo. He knew I wasn't traveling, but he didn't know why. I just told him I wanted to surprise his mom. He didn't ask questions. Just don't tell anyone you saw me, I asked. I stayed at the warehouse until noon, mostly to pass the time. I ate stew at Rosie's diner. Then I went to the market. I bought the lasagna for our surprise dinner. I ordered white tulips from Mrs. Daisy's flower shop. I got home around 3 in the afternoon. I parked a block away so she wouldn't hear the truck. I'll never forget the feel of the March sun on my back, the smell of magnolias, the sound of birds, the details of the moment right before your life changes forever. The house was quiet. "Ellie?" I called softly. No answer. Her car wasn't in the garage. That was odd. She rarely went out on Wednesdays. I put the groceries in the kitchen. I went to the bedroom. The bed was made, everything tidy. But in the bathroom, her expensive moisturizers, her makeup, they weren't in their usual places. Confused, I went back to the living room. Maybe she'd gone to the market. I decided to wait. I sat on the couch. The minutes dragged by. 4 o'clock. 5, 6 o'clock. The sun began to set, and Eleanor still hadn't come home. I started to worry. What if something had happened? I called her cell, straight to voicemail. I called Nina. "Honey, do you know where your mom is?" She was surprised. "Dad? I thought you were in Pittsburgh. Mom didn't say anything about going out." I made up an excuse, said I was just checking in. I called a few of Eleanor's friends from the library. No one knew where she was. Or so they said. Looking back, their answers were evasive. At 8 o'clock, I went to the sheriff's office. Maple Valley is a small town. Officer Davis was on duty. "Calm down, Artie," he said, after I told him she was supposed to be home spring cleaning. "Mrs. Eleanor is a responsible woman. It hasn't even been 24 hours. We can't file a report just yet." I returned home feeling worse. That was a long night. I sat on the couch, watching the door, waiting for the sound of her car on the gravel. Nothing. Day broke. I was still alone. Her phone was still off. Just as I was about to go back to the sheriff, something occurred to me. The checkbook. Eleanor always kept a small, leather-bound notebook with her checkbook, where she wrote appointments. I went to the drawer in the study. The notebook was there. I started flipping through, looking for a clue. On the page for the current week, for Wednesday, yesterday, I found a note. Jules. Just that. No other information. Who was Jules? I kept looking, and I found the same note on previous dates. Always Jules. Always on the days she said she had her art class. I remembered the man in the French cafe. I turned to the front of the notebook. On the back cover, a phone number was written in pencil. No name. With trembling hands, I dialed it from the home phone. On the third ring, a deep, educated male voice answered. "Hello?" I was silent. "Hello? Who is this?" the voice insisted. I hung up. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. That voice. It confirmed my worst suspicions. I had to do something. I called Leo. "Son, I need you to take me to Columbus. We're going to check the hotels. I didn't give him details. He heard the worry in my voice. Okay, Dad. I'm coming. We spent the whole morning going from hotel to hotel. At each reception desk, I showed a photo of Eleanor, asked if she'd stayed there. Some places I saw a flash of recognition, but they all said no record. Then, at a modest but stylish hotel in the short north, near that same cafe, I got a lead. The receptionist, a young woman, hesitated when she saw the photo. Did she check in as Eleanor Vance? She asked, checking the computer. Yes, I said, my stomach twisting. No, there's no one by that name. But her eyes gave her away. Please, I insisted. She's my wife. I'm worried. If you know anything. The girl looked around. There is a lady who looks like her, she whispered. But she's registered as Eleanor Hayes. She checked in yesterday. With a gentleman. Room 214. Hayes. Her maiden name. A name she hadn't used in over 40 years. The world just fell out from under me. Are they there now? I asked, my voice breaking. The receptionist nodded. They left early, but they didn't check out. They should be back. I thanked the girl. Leo looked at me, my face pale. Dad, are you okay? No, son, I'm not. But I need to figure this out. You can leave me here. Go back to Maple Valley. I'll call you. After he left, I crossed the street. I went into that same French cafe. I sat at a window where I could watch the hotel entrance. I ordered a coffee that I never touched. Time slowed down. Noon. 1 o'clock, 2. At 3:30 in the afternoon, a car pulled up to the hotel. It was Eleanor's car. She got out of the passenger side. She was smiling, looking younger and happier than I'd seen her in years. The driver got out. A tall man, neat gray hair, expensive coat. The same man from the cafe. Jules. He put his arm around Eleanor's waist, with an intimacy, a comfort, that only comes from being together a long time. And they walked into the hotel together. I was paralyzed. From the cafe window, I watched my wife of 45 years walk into a hotel on another man's arm. Part of me wanted to run across the street and confront them. Another part wanted to get in my truck and drive away, pretend I'd seen nothing. But this pain, like the ache in my shoulder, it was real. I couldn't escape it. I had to know the truth, the whole truth. I waited another hour. It felt like a lifetime. Finally, I stood up, paid for the coffee, and crossed the street. At the reception desk, the same girl looked at me with pity. I didn't have to say anything. She just nodded, indicating they were still in the room. I climbed the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. My right shoulder ached as I gripped the banister. I found room 214. I stood in front of the door. My heart was pounding so hard. I thought they could hear it inside. I raised my hand to knock, but I froze. I could hear her voice inside. My wife of 45 years. My Eleanor. She was laughing. That bright crystal laugh I hadn't heard in ages. "Jules, you're impossible," she said, in a fit of giggles. Jules. So that was his name. The Jules from the notebook. I took a deep breath, and I knocked. The sounds inside stopped. A few seconds later, footsteps. The door opened slightly, and there she was. my Eleanor. Her hair was down. She was wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before. Her face went from shock to disbelief to pure, icy panic. "Artie," she whispered. "What? How? You were in Pittsburgh." "May I come in?" I asked. My voice sounded calm, dead. She hesitated, then opened the door. I walked in. I saw the man, Jules, standing by the window. He had taken off his coat. He looked presentable. "So this is it," I said, looking from one to the other. "All this time, the art classes, the educational trips, it was all a lie." Eleanor started to cry. "Artie, I can explain." "No need," I cut her off. "It's pretty clear." Jules stepped forward. "Mr. Vance, I know this looks terrible, but you don't owe me an explanation," I intervened. "From the looks of it, you didn't even know I existed." And that's when I saw the look they exchanged. It wasn't just guilt. It was something else. "What do you mean?" I asked. "What aren't you telling me?" Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed. "Artie, this is Jules. I get that," I said bitterly. Jules answered, his voice low. "Because, Mr. Vance, until a few weeks ago, I believed Eleanor was a widow." The words echoed in my head. "Widowed?" I repeated, stunned. Eleanor looked at me, her eyes a mix of shame and a strange defiance. "Yes, Artie. I told him, and everyone in Columbus, that I was a widow, that my husband died 2 years ago." The ground slipped out from under my feet. A pain shot through my shoulder, so sharp I thought I was having a stroke right there. You killed me?" I asked. How did I die?" She sighed. "Your shoulder pain," she said, looking down. "I said your shoulder pain triggered a heart attack. I said you never stopped hauling those packages, that your body couldn't take it. I said you died suddenly, but that I was moving on with my life." Jules looked as shocked as I was. "Eleanor, you told me." "It was all a lie," she confessed, looking right at me. "Artie, I know it sounds awful, but after taking care of everyone for so many years, the kids, you, the students, I needed something that was mine." "Why not just ask for a divorce?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why, this awful charade?" She gave a small, joyless laugh. "A divorce? In Maple Valley? At 67? Me, the respected principal? You, the owner of Vance Logistics? Everyone would judge, they would talk. It would have ruined Nina and Leo. The reputation I built. Gone. It was just easier to live 2 lives. Here I was Eleanor Hayes, an intellectual, respectable widow who'd found new love. In Maple Valley, I was still Mrs. Eleanor Vance, faithful wife of Artie, the delivery man. The calmness with which she explained it, I didn't recognize this woman. Jules looked truly ashamed. "Mr. Vance, I swear I didn't know. If I had known you were alive, married, I never would have." I believed him. He'd been betrayed too. "How long?" I asked. 2.5 years, Jules replied. "We met at a museum fundraiser in late 2017. The dates matched, right when I'd started to notice the changes. "So, all those trips?" "Yes," Eleanor confirmed. "When I went to Chicago or Cincinnati, I was with Jules." Why, Ellie? I asked, my voice finally cracking. If you didn't love me, why not just end it? Why the lies? She lifted her head, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Cold calculation. Because this way, Artie, I had the best of both worlds. In Maple Valley, I had the respect, the comfort of our home, the children, the grandchildren. Here, I had the excitement, the freedom to be someone else without the weight of 45 years of trucks and packages. Those words. Trucks and packages. That hit me like a punch to the gut. And me? I asked. Where did I fit in? You were part of my life in Maple Valley. I didn't want to hurt you. That's why I never said anything. You didn't want to hurt me? I repeated, in disbelief. You killed me, Eleanor. You took my real pain, the ache in my shoulder, and you buried me with it. How did you think this wouldn't hurt? I never thought you'd find out, she confessed. And that was probably the only truth she spoke all day. I left that hotel room a different man. I didn't say anything else. I just turned my back and walked away. I left them there with their secrets. I took a bus back to Maple Valley, staring out the window, not seeing anything. 45 years. A whole life. And it was a charade. When I got home, I packed a bag, took my papers, and left. I couldn't sleep under that roof. I went to Leo's house. I sat him down and told him everything. It was the hardest conversation of my life. I saw the disbelief in his eyes, then the anger, then the sadness. It can't be true, Dad. Mom wouldn't do that. The next day, Nina came. They both needed to hear her side, of course. But by the time Eleanor finally came back to Maple Valley, looking for them, they already knew. It was a terrible time. The family I'd built was shattered. Eleanor tried to explain, to justify. I was bored. It was a mistake. But no explanation could make sense of such a cruel, detailed betrayal. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a denial of my whole existence. I filed for divorce. At 69 years old, with a useless right shoulder, I was starting over. The first few months were the hardest. I rented a small house near the warehouse. I threw myself into watching Leo run the business. The kids stayed by my side, but it was complicated. She was still their mother. News spread fast in Maple Valley. You can't hide something like that in a small town. I felt the pitying stares at Rosie's diner. To many, I was just poor old Artie. That hurt, almost as much as the betrayal. As for Jules, I heard he broke it off with Eleanor too. He was as shocked as I was by the extent of her lies. After the divorce, Eleanor moved to Columbus for good. The kids, they're in touch with her. But nothing is the same. The family celebrations, the Sunday barbecues, that's all over. Time passed. The pain, it never disappears. But it becomes more bearable. I learned to live alone. I started fishing more. I spend time with my grandkids. Today, 5 years after that day, I'm 74. A few more wrinkles, a few fewer dreams, but I'm still here. The warehouse, now Vance Logistics & Son, is thriving under Leo. I still go there every day, more to chat than to work. My shoulder can't lift a package, but I can still optimize a route. I haven't been with anyone else. It's not for lack of opportunity, but something inside me just closed off. The hardest lesson is that you can never truly know what's in another person's heart. 45 years. and I never imagined she was capable of that. I never suspected the depth of her dissatisfaction, the void she needed to fill by creating another life. I also learned to forgive. Not her, but to forgive myself. For a long time, I blamed myself. What did I do wrong? Where did I fail that she needed to invent my death? It took me a long time to understand. You're not responsible for other people's choices. Sometimes, their delivery routes just don't go where you're going anymore. Old age brings wisdom, but it also brings the realization that time is too short to live with resentment. So I chose to move forward. I haven't forgotten, but I won't let that betrayal define the rest of my days. My children and grandchildren are my joy. Leo is following in my footsteps. Nina is still teaching. Maya is 15 now, wants to study business like her dad. Noah, he's 14. He loves climbing on those big trucks at the warehouse, always asking me to teach him how to steer. Who knows? Maybe he'll be the third generation. If there's one thing I want to say to everyone listening, it's this. Value the truth. No matter how painful, the truth sets you free. Living a lie, even a comfortable one, is like building a warehouse on sand. Eventually, it all collapses. Be honest with yourselves and with the people you love. If you're unhappy, speak up. Don't create parallel lives. Don't symbolically kill someone who has stood by you. And it's never too late to start over. At 69, I had to learn to live alone again, with a useless shoulder. It was hard. But here I am, still standing, still finding reasons to be grateful. Life is a delivery route full of surprises. Sometimes the package is heavy. Sometimes the address is wrong. What matters is how we face them and how we keep driving that truck. If this story made you think, please leave a like to brighten this old man's day. Subscribe to the channel, my dears, so you don't miss the next ones. And tell me something in the comments. Where are you watching this from? And what time is it where you are? This old grandpa of yours is just happy to know who's listening and that you took a little time out of your day to hear my story.